Greetings, everyone. Well, for today's Halloween review, I wanted to talk about a TV series which some of you may have heard of and others may not have heard of. Now, this is an interesting animal because it was a TV series actually based on a role-playing game, specifically a very horror-focused role-playing game entitled Vampire the Masquerade. Now, Vampire the Masquerade was part of a much larger sort of world of role-playing games called the World of Darkness. And each game system within that basically followed the same sort of basic game rules, but had its own story and its own backstory and its own characters and different things, and focused on different aspects of sort of popular horror themes, and getting into some magic and fantasy themes as well, but all mixed in within this sort of World of Darkness umbrella that was essentially like our modern world, but where all these various supernatural creatures actually existed, usually in secret, just under our noses, and helped to shape world events. So you had this sort of alternate history of the world, where all these monsters and everything were real. So some of the games that were in the World of Darkness pantheon of games were Vampire the Masquerade, easily the most popular one; Werewolf the Apocalypse, easily the second most popular one; Wraith the Oblivion, which is about ghosts; Mage the Ascension, which is about magicians, sorcerers; Changeling the Dreaming, which I guess was about changelings. So you can see they kind of worked some fantasy elements into it as well, I guess. Hunter the Reckoning, which is basically about Van Helsing types, but like groups of them and stuff like that, and modern badass Van Helsings. What else did you have? You had Demon the Fallen, which was one of the later ones they did. You had Orpheus, which I actually know absolutely nothing about. It was another one of the later ones they did. There was a whole bunch of different ones that they did, and it was really popular for a very long time. Started in the early 90s and ran until 2003, when they actually discontinued the original World of Darkness line and then revamped the series. They basically re-released some of the more popular ones with a revised game system. Now, the TV series that we're going to be talking about was based on the original World of Darkness, specifically based on Vampire the Masquerade. Now, the whole idea with Vampire the Masquerade was it was this secret society of vampires that dated all the way back to the time of Cain and Abel. Yes, the characters from the Bible. So the story goes that Cain killed his brother Abel, just like you know from the Bible, but then was cursed by God for all eternity. So Cain actually became the first vampire. And from that incident, all later generations of vampires emerged. So the vampires were divided into clans. Each clan sort of had a different focus. So some of them were more kind of brutal and warlike. Others were more kind of magic focused. Others were artists. Others were deformed but very intelligent and clandestine. Some of them were assassins. So you had 13 different clans total, each one that focused on sort of a different thing. But one golden rule that most of the clans obeyed anyway was that they had to follow the rules of what they called the Masquerade. And what the Masquerade was basically keeping mortal man, the majority of the populace, unaware of their existence. So, basically just trying to keep them keep the facts of their existence secret, and just sort of kept in the realms of folklore and stories and such. So maybe there really are vampires out there. Who knows? Anyway, today we're going to talk about Kindred, the Embraced, the sadly short-lived television series adaptation from Aaron Spelling Productions of Vampire the Masquerade. Today on the Multimedia Chronicles. Welcome back. Now, to go into the entire back history of the World of Darkness and Vampire the Masquerade would take far longer than we have here. Now, I didn't really play the game very much. I played a few sessions with some friends a while back, but my primary interest in it was actually the spin-off stories, the spin-off literature, such as they had The Beast Within, which was a collection of short stories set in the Vampire the Masquerade world. And you had Prince of the City, which is actually a sequel to another book called Dark Prince, which sadly I no longer have, but really good. And then they had a trilogy, the Masquerade of the Red Death trilogy. It had Blood War, Unholy Allies, and finally The Unbeholden. Now, this is really just the tip of the iceberg as far as how many books they published. They actually published other trilogies such as this, other single books like this, a few more anthologies, I think. And they actually, one of the last big series of books that they did was a series of 13 novels, each of which would focus on one of the 13 clans. They also did some crossover books because, in addition to the role-playing game, they also did a collectible card game. Now, this is actually kind of a collector's item deck, because this is when it went under its original title of Jihad. Now, Jihad, the term Jihad in the Vampire the Masquerade world basically referred to a vampire war. So whenever different clans would war against each other, and there often were conflicts between the different clans, and you get into that quite a bit in the books and in some of the game modules and whatnot. But when the collectible card game came out, they called it Jihad, and this is actually all they ever released of it, just starter decks like this. So it's supposed to have 76 cards and a rule book. I actually counted all of mine just before doing this video, and it turns out I got 78 cards and the rule book, so that was pretty cool. Nice little bonus there. But that's something of a collector's item, because after that, they named it Vampire the Eternal Struggle, which, similar title to the role-playing game, but a little less potentially religiously offensive to those of the Muslim faith. So anyway, the Jihad deck is kind of a collector's item, but they also published some books based on Vampire the Eternal Struggle, such as House of Secrets and On a Darkling Plain. The thing about these books that I really liked was they often would hire up-and-coming horror authors to write them. So just taken on their own as novels, as like horror, fiction, they're really good. They're actually really well written a lot of the time, and incredibly entertaining. And then they also did crossover books between the different worlds, or the different games within the World of Darkness. So, for example, you have City of Darkness Unseen, which is another anthology, which actually contains stories from not just Vampire, but some of the others as well. And then you got Pomegranate's Full and Fine, which is a novel that actually crosses over a few things as well. I don't think it says specifically. It incorporates Unseelie Changelings, Sabbat Vampires, and Nefandi Mages. There you go. So there's that. So these are all the books, well, not all of them, but some of the books published by White Wolf Studios, the company that published the game. And then in addition to that, at the same time, HarperCollins was also publishing some books as well. I had a couple more of these a while back, but sadly made the mistake of lending them to a friend who decided never to return them. Yes, needless to say, he wasn't a friend for very long. So that kind of in a nutshell is my World of Darkness novel collection, just to give you a background on my interest in the franchise and why I was really excited to hear that there was a TV series coming out. Yes, so let's talk a little bit about the TV series. Now, the TV series only ran it was just a mid-season replacement show. It only ran for 8 episodes, and then it was canceled, unfortunately. It just didn't do very well. Now, only having 8 episodes, obviously they didn't really have enough time to go into, particularly deep plots, basically. For what there is, the 8 episodes they did, I think they did an admirable job of trying to encompass all that is the world of Vampire the Masquerade in a fairly short span of time. And had the series continued, I'm sure they would have expanded further and we would have seen more of the different clans. But as it stands, I think they only cover about 6 of the clans, 6 of the 13 clans. over the course of the series. You've got the Ventru, the Gangrel, the Bruja, the Nosferatu, the was it Toreador? That's 5. You got the Assamites, which are basically the assassin clans, and one other one I can't remember. But anyway, because they realized that this was a really ambitious project and something that, the casual viewer may not be familiar with the world, the first episode basically just tries to sort of set the foundations for what's going on and sort of set some events in motion that provide some background and some exposition along the way. The pilot episode is not the strongest episode of the series. I think from episode 2 through 8, it really picks up steam quickly and actually gets pretty darn good. The problem a lot of people had with it, of course, is this was mid-90s television. I think this came out in 1996, if I'm not mistaken. 1996. And, and it was a network television thing. And around that time, I mean, that you couldn't really have as much in the way of graphic violence without being a later night show, and they wanted this basically on in prime time. So they were kind of limited as far as what they could do in terms of graphic content. Now, if they had done this show today as, say, like an HBO series, honestly, I think that would have been the optimal route to go, because then they would be freer to do it. Because if you read the books and play the game or have any familiarity with the other spin-offs of the Vampire the Masquerade stories and lore, you'll know that the World of Darkness is a very violent place. I mean, it comes by its name very honestly. There's a lot of bloodshed, there's a lot of warring between different factions, a lot of betrayal, and a lot of sex, and just all this stuff that would make perfect material for an HBO series, but oh well. For all its shortcomings in terms of violence and sex, I think they did a pretty good job in building an interesting story. So the TV series primarily follows the Prince of the City. In this case, I think it's Los Angeles, if I'm not mistaken. San Francisco. Sorry, San Francisco. Yeah, so they have each major city has a prince, which is essentially the head vampire for the clans in that city, and they have sort of a council of representatives of all of the clans who are present in that city. But whichever clan has, their prince as the prince of the city, he's basically the leader of the city. It's sort of the mayor, as it were, but the mayor that controls the events of the supernatural things going on behind the scenes, and stuff like that. So anyway, it follows basically. There's the Ventru clan are the ones in charge of San Francisco in this case, and they kind of work closely with the Toreadors, who are the artists and run nightclubs and stuff like that. Trying to keep the Bruja in check. The Bruja are kind of like the biker gangs of the almost like the mafia of the like biker gang / mafia of the city. You got the Gangrels, who are also kind of like rebellious biker gang types, but they're not as like flat out anarchic as the Bruja, so they tend to work with the Ventru sometimes. The Nosferatu are basically an even more secretive clan of vampires. They're even secretive to the other clans, sort of have their own motivations, their own way of doing things. They often are kind of like spies, I guess you could say, because they're able to slip in and out of the shadows a lot more, quietly than, or stealthily is the term I was thinking of, than other vampires. But yeah, some really cool stuff. For the 8 episodes that it lasted, I think they did a pretty decent job. And it's unfortunate that they weren't able to continue it. Actually, one of the main characters who played Prince Julian, the prince of the head of the Ventru clan and the prince of the city, actually died tragically in a motorcycle accident shortly after the series wrapped. And so that was kind of unfortunate. I'm sure that didn't help its chances of coming back. But I'm sure had it. But it's just because it didn't do very well in the ratings. But if it had come back, I'm sure they would have found some way to work around that terrible tragedy. But Yeah, I liked it. I liked it a lot. Now, this DVD set, I actually had this on VHS when it first came out. I remember going down to the local HMV and asking when it was coming. I didn't know exactly when the release date was. I just heard that it was coming. And I remember going down to the local HMV and asking if they could order it in for me or tell me when it was coming in. And the girl that I talked to was really completely clueless. I was like, yeah, it's called Kindred the Embraced. And she was like, oh, okay, Kindred the Embraces? I'm like, no, the Embraced. Oh, okay. So Kindred the Embraces? No. And it's not like Vampire the Masquerade was this big, secretive, unknown thing. I mean, it was hugely popular at the time. It was a massive, massive, successful role playing game. And, yeah, but clearly, working in selling media in HMV, you just don't have a clue of anything beyond what's sold in that store. It's like, come on, broaden your horizons a little bit. Just learn a little bit about other things. I don't know, whatever. Yeah. So I guess realizing that the world of Vampire the Masquerade and Kindred the Embraced might be a little bit, complex for the average TV viewer to just kind of jump into with the TV series, they actually put out this book called Book of the Kindred. Now, Book of the Kindred borrows some sections and is largely inspired by an earlier book that was put out as a primer for people interested in the role-playing game, namely Book of the Damned. Now, Book of the Damned, essentially, you have you have a bunch of short stories and background information about stuff. Some really nice artwork by Timothy Bradstreet, actually, who is actually doing a lot of comic book covers these days. But yeah, some really cool stuff. So this was kind of in a way, in a lot of ways, this combined with the Anne Rice vampire stories, which were quite popular around the same time this came out, was really kind of the start of the sort of hip, cool vampires. You had Near Dark that came out a few years earlier, and Lost Boys and stuff like that. But yeah, so that's the Book of the Damned, and then the Book of the Kindred has a lot of the same material, but a lot of additional material too, like in more sort of expanded form. That's quite cool. This here, the Book of Nod, is basically the Vampire Bible. Essentially, it gives you the. For a long time, it was actually kind of a mysterious thing that was it was referred to in stories and game modules, but nobody actually saw it or knew what it was. And then White Wolf decided to publish it. So this is basically the Book of Nod. It's intended to be just a resource for game masters. There you actually see a rather graphic picture of Cain killing Abel. So it goes a lot into the backstory of the whole Cain and Abel thing, how Cain got cursed, and the the rise of the clans and whatnot. So it gives you a lot of backstory to draw upon there. Yeah. So anyway, if you liked Vampire the Masquerade or World of Darkness and never had a chance to check out the TV series, I definitely recommend it. I mean, it's not a huge time commitment. It's only 8 45-minute episodes. Well, the pilot's a little bit longer. And I think it was a good effort. Unfortunately, a lot of fans at the time were kind of harsh about it and were referring to it as Vampire 90210, saying, "Oh, it's too soap opera-like." It's like, well, it's a continuing story. I mean, I was just happy that they made it basically a continuing story, which you didn't see a lot of back then. But there was a pretty tight continuity to those 8 episodes, and Oh, and 80s movie fans might want to take note. C. Thomas Howell actually stars in the show as a cop who's trying to blow the lid off the vampires, the vampire culture and whatnot, and kind of becomes involved with them. So that's a lot of fun. Anyway, yeah, that's pretty much the World of Darkness, Vampire the Masquerade, and Kindred the Embraced in a very small nutshell. There's, as I say, it's huge, and a lot more could be said about it, but I just wanted to kind of touch on it all and mostly talk about the TV series and stuff like that. But yeah, even though I never really played the game, I really enjoyed the stories. I really enjoyed the TV show. And I was never really into collectible card games, but I really just picked this up on a whim because I like the artwork. You know, that was one thing I always liked about the game books, was they just have beautiful artwork. Like, again, much like how the novels are written by up and coming horror authors at the time, the game books often had up and coming artists doing the artwork for them. So White Wolf Studios definitely had their shit together as far as, you know, making it an attractive package for you know, horror and vampire enthusiasts and such. And the other ones were equally attractive. I mean, like the werewolf one looks fantastic, and yeah, it's good stuff. So anyway, that is it from me to you for now. So until next time, thanks for watching, and sayonara.